The technology inside a lightsaber is incredibly simple, even primitive, by the standards of the hyperdrive engine. The premise for its function is to be a frozen blaster bolt, or rather an ionized plasma beam that arcs back to its source, forming a fixed or variable length electrically heated energy beam. When it is wielded in the hands of a skilled swordsperson, a lightsaber's beam can deflect a blaster bolt or cut through skin and bone, cauterizing the wound and painlessly killing the nerves. In the earliest Legacy-style lightsabers, an activation key connected the circuit to activate an exposed diatium power cell inside the hand grip to a primary crystal at the opposite end of the handle from the blade emitter, with the focusing crystal in the middle between. This design proved needlessly dangerous and was soon replaced by the basic Legacy model, which placed both crystals in between the emitter end and an insulated diatium power cell at the other. The electrical wiring of the basic Legacy model lightsaber is very complex, but its circuitry is simple. The diatium power cell at one end of the hilt is insulated in a power field conductor that cycles the diatium's power into a vortex ring surrounding the power cell in the lower hilt. This accumulated energy is then passed through a simple on-off circuit switch gate that, when the energy gate is open, allows the activation of a diatium-powered energy pulse to pass relativistically simultaneously through a primary crystal as well as via an activator mount through a secondary focusing crystal inside the same crystal energy chamber. These act to amplify and direct the pulsed diatium-powered energy surge into a blade energy channel guide that culminates at the opposite end from the diatium power source in the magnetic stabilizing ring and flange of the blade arc tip and emitter shroud. Around the lengths of this energy channel guide between the crystal energy chamber and the emitter end are a ring of cycling field energizers controlled by the energy modulation circuits connected to the blade length and power adjustment knobs along the handle casing. By around 30 BBY, the technology of the diatium power cell had improved in two important ways. One, it had become micro-miniaturized and took up almost none of the inner volume of the lightsaber handle, thus allowing a lengthening of the blade energy channel. And two, it had become easily replaceable, with the power cell reserve cap at the belt ring end of the hilt, thus making access to the diatium power cell inside the inert power insulator beneath the hand grip convenient, and the process of switching out diatium power cells easier. The elongation of the blade energy channel that accompanied the adaptation in lightsaber technology to smaller diatium power cells also allowed for more room to fit an emitter matrix array, rendering the later basic Legacy lightsabers as dual-phase models that were capable of working underwater. The emitter matrix was little more than an additional stabilization flange, serving to widen the gap in the saber's arc tip. The traditional Legacy model only had an adjustable magnetic stabilizing ring inside the emitter shroud. This had allowed the magnetic stabilizing ring tuning flange to adjust the arc tip's diameter, much as the power and length adjust knobs did via the energy modulation circuits. Because then Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi's first lightsaber was destroyed dueling Count Dooku during the Battle of Geonosis that began the Clone Wars. His second, replacement lightsaber, showed these latest innovations and improvements using the smaller diatium power cells, the longer energy channel, and the emitter matrix for dual phase use. When Anakin Skywalker, then still Kenobi's Padawan, had constructed his lightsaber, many of these improvements had not been adopted. It is known, however, that by the time Skywalker turned to the dark side and became Darth Vader, replacing his original blue focusing crystal with a red Kixani gemstone, he had already converted his basic legacy model to dual phase use. Just as 12 masters sat on the Jedi High Council, so too did 12 forms of lightsaber combat evolve over the ages between the Tython formation of the Jedi Order and its reformation as the new Jedi Order Praxium on Yavin 4 by Luke Skywalker. And just as there was only one Grand Master of the Order, so too did the most important form come first, although it was not counted as a form in itself. Form 0, Ashla Sokan versus Bogan Dun Mach. Sokan was the strategy of using one's surrounding terrain and environment to one's tactical advantage and to the tactical disadvantage of one's opponent. Because it was the Jedi way to attempt to resolve conflicts without resorting to violence, the practice of Sokan was associated with the Ashla aspect of the Force. The concept eventually came down to the axiom, assume the moral high ground. The dark side, or Bogan equivalent of Ashla's Sokan, was called Dun Mach, and was essentially the art of frightening your opponent by demonstrating superior knowledge and skill. Just as one of the greatest demonstrations of successful application of Sokan was in Obi-Wan Kenobi's defeat of Darth Vader on Mustafar, so was the simultaneous battle between Yoda and Darth Sidious one of the greatest demonstrations of the Sith use of Dun Mach, as well as the Jedi's form of defense against it. For protective moves, one would retreat and attempt to keep their opponent at a safe distance away from them using an inner toward outer ringed defense. For offensive moves, one would advance to draw their opponent in as close as possible using the outer toward the inner rings of space surrounding their body. Because of the overlap in space of Ashla and Bogan students of the Force, it may be impossible to avoid armed conflict if it means defending your own survival, or, as was the Jedi way, to protect all life and preserve symbiotic balance in all existence. When a situation arose that necessitated aggressive negotiations, there was a galaxy-wide saying that might dwarf in age the original Jedi mantra: peace through superior firepower, which taught that only by possessing the most superior knowledge and skill one could one win any fight before it began. When it becomes necessary to survive by demonstrating superior knowledge and skill to an opponent in lightsaber combat, it is not necessary to know each and every one of the 8 moves and 25 form-specific maneuvers by name, although it can't hurt to have studied them beforehand either. It is sufficient to master what are called the 6 body target zones, consisting of the opponent's head, Zone 1, the opponent's right and left arms and upper torso, Zones 2 and 3, the opponent's back, Zone 4, and the opponent's right and left legs, Zones 5 and 6, respectively. One can seek to disarm an opponent by striking at their arms, cripple an opponent by striking at their legs, or kill an opponent by striking their head or exposed flank. There are 9 identified marks of contact in a lightsaber duel, 6 of which disarm, 1 of which cripples, and 2 of which kill. Just as the Jedi is cautioned to use their arts only for knowledge and defense, and never for aggression or attack, so too do the defensive rings of space around us, the 6 zones of defense, and the 9 marks of contact constitute the most fundamental methods for technique in lightsaber combat.